Hi, I'm going to be doing my book summary, and my name is Eunice Ocampo Martini, and this is for Education 407. The book that I went with is called Beyond the Hole in the Wall by Sugata Mitra. So he begins the book with asking an important question. Is formal education as we know it an outdated idea? So, a little bit about Sugata Mitra. He's a professor of education technology at the School of Education, Communication, and Language Science in Newcastle University in England. He's also a visiting professor at MIT Media Lab in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and he also works in the areas of cognitive science, information science, and education technology. He's interested in technologies for remote and rural education and self-organizing systems. He is quoted often, and he has a few quotes that are very popular. One of them is, "You don't actually need to know anything. You can find out at the point when you need to know it." It's teachers' jobs to point young minds towards the right kind of questions. A teacher doesn't need to give the answer because answers are everywhere. So he kind of begins the book stating that there are some assumptions about education. Some of them are on how you achieve it, how it's measured. The default school model is the best way. And also, age segregation is a good idea. He states that students should not be segregated just based on their age, that ability should kind of come into account when it comes to how we group students together. So the experiment that he did was the hole in the wall. So the experiment was done for more than a decade and across 5 continents. It dealt with how learning happens and how consciousness develops. So we first wanted to deal with the issue at hand, and it was unequal education. So when driving to New Delhi, to rural northern eastern India, Mitra's colleagues began to administer a set of tests to students to check proficiency in English, math, and science. They also asked teachers at the primary schools, "Would you like to work somewhere else?" Something interesting really happened. So for the first 50 kilometers, which is about 31 miles, teachers said no. They wouldn't want to work anywhere else. But as they kept driving away from New Delhi, after the 50 kilometers, teachers began to say yes. They wanted to work somewhere else. They took how the students did on the test, and they also took into consideration the response of the teachers, and they graphed their findings, which showed that the farther the school was from urban centers, the lower the grade of the students. Noting that the significant negative correlation between quality of education offered at particular schools and the distance of the school from the nearest urban center. So his solution was the hole in the wall. So he asked this question: can technology play a role in improving the quality of education? And he came up with a simple idea: give access to computers to small children and let them learn without adult interference. So in 1999, in January, they placed a computer with online access in a wall opening in Kalkalji, New Delhi. Children began to explore. Within a few hours, they were figuring out how to surf the web, and they stated that translated to computer literacy. So children taught themselves, and within 6 months, they were able to learn mouse operations. So the hole in the wall effect. They really did like what came out of that one computer and kind of started growing from there. They added 10 more computers in villages. Then the principal secretary of Delhi funded 30 computers. And they kept having other people donate as well. But they wanted to measure the progress of the children's computer literacy. And they wanted to come up with a test that really did assess how the students were doing with computer literacy. And what they came up with is the Icon Association Inventory. So this shows they showed children 77 common icons in Windows environment and asked children to describe what they mean. Children started to become more computer literate and on their own, and they were scoring about 40% after 9 months. So the way it kind of worked is when you have the arrow, we call it arrow. Children did not know that, but in their own language, they used a word that actually did mean arrow. So they were trying to figure out what the different icons mean in their own way. So one of the quotes that he did state is, learning is a product of educational self-organization. It's not about making learning happen. It's about letting it happen. And he kind of started developing methods of instructions. One of them was MIE, which is minimal invasive education. So he felt that students need to be given the opportunity to kind of explore without us intervening as much. He did feel that that can close the digital divide and allow creative potential of self-development in children. But he wanted to go a little bit beyond that. So beyond just computer literacy. And he did notice that it did improve English pronunciation with speech-to-text programs. But he had another question. So clicking at a computer screen is one thing, but learning a subject is another. Or is it? So he wanted to see whether students are not just learning how to use the computer, but can use it to learn a specific content. So he focused on biology. And the way he did it is he gave access to hole-in-the-wall computers. Children taught themselves basic biotechnology and began with a score of 0, and after 2 months, scored 30%, which is great. You know, they did improve, but it's not a passing grade. And so he asked a friend if she can kind of mentor students a little bit about encouraging them to learn more about it. She didn't know a lot about it, and so he asked her to use the grandmother method, which is admire learning and encourage learning. So after 2 months with the grandmother method, the students' scores rose to 50%. And that kind of gave him the idea of having kind of like mentors. So he came out with the Granny Cloud, which is British grandmothers who volunteer to Skype with children in simple things such as reading students' stories. And that was one of the things he did. But the other thing is he came up with SOLE, SOLE, which stands for Self-Organized Learning Environments. So it's very basic, simple idea. You provide broadband, collaboration, encouragement, and admiration. So teacher constructs a brilliant question for students to work in small groups and investigate. So it's very simple. The kids are working in a small group environment. They're given opportunity to collaborate with each other. They're given access to computers. They're encouraged and admired for their learning. And they come up with the answers on their own in a way. Teachers do not give the answers. Teachers just lead them to it and encourage them to find it. So he did feel that this leads to self-organization, which leads to develop cognition and eventually conscience. One thing that he did do throughout the book is he interweaves a story about a little girl who lives in the year 2062 named Rita, and how her interaction with technology is different. She has access to Bluetooth stereo implants, BSIS, which is like a small computer that's implanted into her ear. She's able to talk to it, and it is able to talk back to her. At the end, Rita is given the opportunity to build a self-organizing network by being allowed to explore with technology. So again, I did like that he kind of thought about it in the future. What is this going to look like? And I think that's what he was trying to do with Rita's story. But I felt that it did take away a little bit from what he was doing, because I think what he was doing in India was so great that it kind of distracted from that. But I understand why he wants to bring in this idea of the future. What is technology going to look like in the future? And how can we address those needs? And kind of start thinking about how are we going to work with students when technology is more advanced. So it's a great thing that he did, but I did feel like it did take away from what he's doing now. So with the conclusion, Sugata Mitra argues that education today is dated and children benefit from self-organized learning environments where they're allowed to interact in small groups and are provided with technology to learn through discovery. I feel like his argument is great, and his experiment with the hole in the wall did really back up his thesis. However, I would argue that he did state that India struggles a lot with, the divide with education, that it's unequal. And also with technology. In the book, he did state that about 70 million children do not even go to first grade. And he did state that in India, that is an issue. They're not given, sufficient opportunity to go to school or given opportunity to use technology. And so I felt that the children that he was servicing with this project were really wanting to learn. Were just wanted to have the opportunity to use technology and learn. And so I think that's why it was successful. But my question would be, is this going to be something that's effective in like the United States, where students do have access to education and technology? There is some inequality with education, but not to the extent that there is in India. And so I think in the United States, his results might not be the same. I feel that here the issue is motivation, is getting the kids understanding why it's important to go to school and why they should learn the material. They do have access to education. They do have access to technology. And I feel like at times they're overwhelmed with technology, where they do get distracted with their smartphones. They do get distracted on computers when they're given access to the computers to work on a project. A lot of times they use it for other things because they're not, I wouldn't say the students are technology advanced. They know how to use it for social media, but they're not motivated to go past their wants. So I would just state that I like his idea. I think what he did was great in India. However, I would like to see if that experiment is done here, is there going to be different results? Overall, it's a great book. I do recommend it. It was an easy read. I do wish it was a hard copy, but I do recommend that you watch the TED Talk as well, because he does provide a lot of insight there. And I did really enjoy it. I hope you read it and enjoy it yourself. Thank you.